Joining us now is Dan Geltrude. He's a managing partner at Geltrude and Company. Dan, it's good to have you with us. Takeaways from Nike earnings, a company that does a lot of business here and in China.
Yes, and it makes me wonder how much the tariffs are actually impacting Nike, because let's not forget, tariffs are a tax, and the taxes are not put on nations, they're put on companies. Now, we saw that Nike had an increase in their revenues, great sign, but what happened to the bottom line? Nike claims that they were subject to more taxes. They weren't clear about what happened there, but I'm wondering whether this tariff situation is having an impact on Nike, a company that has for years been very interactive with China.
Right. And can you speak to what is actually going on with the product, Nike's product in China? We heard overnight last night they pulled one of their limited edition shoes. This is in regards to the protests going on in China about that extradition bill. Also, China apparently has now chosen to pull some Nike products from their shelves. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that could impact the company?
Sure. I think those are signs of the times.
Right.
It sounds to me very much like what's going on between our two countries,
exactly.
Right? Seems like there's a tit for tat. Well, you're going to do this, then
right.
We're going to do that. I think Nike has to be extremely careful here, though, because they are tied to China.
Yes.
And as I said, they have been for a long time. So if they're going to start pulling, lines of shoes, for example, because of what's going on politically, the Chinese are very sensitive to those types of issues. We've seen that before, and I think Nike has to be extraordinarily careful as to how they handle the political climate in China.
It's interesting, though, just from a demand perspective, right? This is a brand that still, obviously, with a 22% gain in the top line, does still see demand in this country. As we know, the iPhone, for instance, has waned in demand there. But when we talk about trade holistically, we've got this big G20 summit this weekend between President Trump and China's President Xi Jinping. The market's pointing to a 100-point gain on the open for the Dow. What is the expectation as to what real tangible advances might come out of this meeting?
I think both sides want to make a deal, so that bodes well to get it making some progress. President Trump has threatened more tariffs if a deal does not come out of the G20 summit. So you have that looming. Now, let's not forget, Steve Mnuchin said before it fell apart, the deal going back a month or so ago, they were 90% there. So can they resurrect a trade deal and ultimately get it over the finish line? I think ultimately we're going to get there because both sides want the deal. It really comes down to, in my opinion, the intellectual property issue and the theft thereof. I think that's the key part that they just can't come to terms on.
And talking about the G20 summit, obviously he has yet to meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping. That's supposed to happen around 10 p.m. Eastern time. But he has, however, met with Russian President Vladimir Putin. What do you think about his exchange when reporters asked him about election interference, obviously, in 2016, and the president kind of wagged his finger saying, don't interfere in the election to Putin. Not really taking it seriously. That was the perception. What's your takeaway from that exchange?
It's a very odd dynamic between President Trump and Putin. And you have to wonder why he takes such a hard line with so many leaders around the world. Yet he seems to be a little bit tentative when it comes to Putin. I think only Donald Trump knows the reason why. Now, if you want to give him the benefit of the doubt, he may want to ease up before discussions with Putin, based upon the type of person Putin may be, because he doesn't want to heat things up too much. Although he doesn't take that position with China because he's meeting at the G20 with China, with President Xi, and he's already saying, hey, if we don't get a deal, you're getting more tariffs.
Look, one of the other big factors that could move this market is the 2020 presidential election. We got the first Democratic debate series of those ending last night. Are there any candidates that Wall Street likes on the Democratic side? Traditionally, we know Wall Street does lean much more Republican.
I think the safe candidate for Wall Street may very well be Joe Biden. I think he's the safe bet. Although I thought his performance last night was weak. I thought Senator Harris really took him to task, and he did not respond well at all. So as far as Wall Street goes, I think they would much rather see a second term for President Trump.
Okay, Dan Geltrude,